I'm Terry White. I'm a radio amateur, G0BXL, and I've been doing talks on the Titanic for our local hospice in Harlow for 20 years now, and I've built myself a radio room in my shed, but this is so very well built. It's probably one of the best I've seen. So there we are. I've been asked to just explain what's here. First of all, we've got the spark gap. This is the piece of equipment where the power from the ship, which is resolved from batteries, and you get this spark firing between these two rods here. And on the Titanic, which is the biggest radio that at that time Marconi had made, in front of us on the table here there are two receivers. There's the main receiver and the standby receiver. They carried two because the wireless in those days was very iffy, and it was quite a problem. The problem with the Titanic was that the actual transmissions from the Titanic were, because it was the biggest one that Marconi had ever made, it was interfering with all the other ships around, and so because he was putting so much power out, other ships trying to use the Marconi equipment were being swamped by the noise of his signals, and so a lot of the ships got really peeved off with the guy, and this was probably another problem when it actually came to the rescue, because what was happening was that the ship, where it was located in the world at the time of the accident, was in fact able to contact both America and Europe at the same time, and a lot of the rich people on board were playing stocks and shares and keeping the operator very busy almost during the full time of the trip. And as these calls are very expensive, the Marconi company were making a few bob for themselves. The equipment here is good. It's beautifully made. At the back of you there, you can see the tubes, which takes the information backwards and forwards. On the Titanic room, there wasn't a speech tube to the bridge, which should have happened, but they had to. All the messages were taken from the wireless room by hand to the captain on the bridge. So it was not a good way of doing things.
But some weren't. There was a warning message about icebergs.
They received. What you've got to remember is that there's two sorts of icebergs. I was a photographer in the Royal Air Force, and I flew in Coastal Command, and we used to have to go out and mark icebergs. And what happens with icebergs is that as they gradually melt as they get into the Gulf Stream, they start melting at a very fast rate, and when they melt they turn over, and when they turn over, like an aquarium full of green muck on the glass, this stuff turns black. And it is my theory that the iceberg that they hit, it's my theory, that the iceberg they hit is probably a berg that had turned over during the night, and they didn't see it because it was a black berg on a black sea, and the only time you see it then is when another shed of ice slides off it and you get a white berg again. And you've got to remember that some of these bergs are enormously big. We've come across some massive ones, and I've got pictures in my collection of some of the big bergs that I've taken. But it's on a black berg on a black sea. And remember the night the Titanic hit this berg, the sea was as flat as a pancake. The temperature of the seawater was -4 to 5, and it was pitch black. And if that was a black berg, which I think it was, the only thing you would see would be the sea breaking at the water level of the iceberg. So the poor old guy on the bridge, who was sitting there in that canvas bucket halfway up the mast, was looking out looking for something which he couldn't see because it was black, and all you could see was a bit of mist where the actual ice was melting in the water. Everybody's got their own theories, and doing this for a long time and read about it all sorts, I think that's what happened. The interesting, in front of us, some of the telegrams are here from the vessels. I've actually got a few of these myself at home. The actual Titanic genuine message documents. The ship I'm building is 2/3 the size of that, and it's plastic, and I've fibre optic the inside of it, so I've got a bundle of fibre optics in there, and they're spread out through the cabins, and you have a torch underneath, hidden away underneath, and they just light up.
And what about the back? You said you've got fibre optics.
So what at the back? So you imagine the green thing here being turned into a sea, which I've done with a silk sari, which has got coloured, flecky, watery colours on it, and the boat is sunk into the sari, right? And behind it, I've got a lace curtain, which is you can't see through because it's all lacy, but represents the horizon, and behind that is some bundle of fibre optics, the normal fibre optic bundles which change colour during the evening, and the idea is to simulate the firework display behind the actual model, and that's what I'm building. That's what I'm actually building at the moment. If you've got a model on the road like I have doing lectures, the problem with this thing is if you take a model out with string or something like that on it, or fishing line, they get damp and they get cold and they tighten up and they look awful. So what I'm doing is I'm putting the stays for the chimney on using fibre optic strands, and I'm sticking them to the deck using UV sensitive glue, which will set in 15 seconds, 5 to 15 seconds.
And what will that mean? It won't.
It will not
tatty.
move. It will stay. It will not move at all. It will be permanent. And if you break them off, you have to put a new one on. But at the moment, these things break all the time. You're manhandling these all the time when you're doing the lectures. So you've got to be interesting. What is interesting on here is the aerial is completely right on here, because the cabin is behind the actual radio cabin is behind the first chimney here, and the cabin has got 3 areas: the working room, the battery room, and the sleeping room. Because the noise of the actual charging of the batteries from the ship's power supply was so noisy that you could hardly hear yourself. So the actual room, one of the rooms where the boys slept, was soundproofed, and so was the actual room where the actual Morse transmission was being made from.
Could you point out where the Marconi wireless room was with Bride and Phillips?
This is here. This section here is the radio room.
What,
It's
is that
whole
big?
section. It's quite a big section there. There are big batteries and everything in it. It's massive. It's almost that back to there. The three rooms.
But in the films, it just looks tiny.
It does. In the film, you've got to remember the film is done to they've got to put so much in the film, and they can't tell you everything.
So in fact, it's this massive area here is the radio room.
This whole area here, almost from there to there, is the 3-section radio room on the Titanic.
And they've got 4 wires here. Is that authentic?
Now, this area is very authentic. It's the multiple band radios. As the ship travelled down the day, certain radio bands were available to it, as though it was able to change frequency on the bands, and that's what those cables are for.
Are they accurately attached to a copper pipe?
They go through a chocolate box and into the radio cab.
Chocolate box? What's a chocolate box?
Well, it's just a divider to get the aerials in, not touching each other and shorting each other out.
So really, this is one of the best reproductions you've seen?
It's a good model. It really is a good model. Well, I've got a friend of mine who's got an antique shop in Norwich, and he always gets bits and pieces coming in, knives and forks, of the Titanic pattern. Now, some of them are original ones, some of them are made from the ship, but none of the cutlery on any of the 3-star liners had the name of the ship on. So if you see a knife, fork or spoon with the Titanic in the handle, or and the White Star emblem on it, you know it's a fake, so don't pay any good money for it.
So fakers would put the Titanic on it to give it an air of authority,
yeah.
But in fact the Titanic didn't have...
Not one of their knives, forks or spoons did have the word.
Because it would probably be deemed as common.
Yeah, that's right. And people would be pinching them for having the word on it.
That's why many hotels today the equipment they have in the bedrooms,
Yeah.
the towels no longer bear the names of the hotel,
no.
unless they want people to
No.
publicise it by taking them.
Yeah.
So you think it was a ploy by the White Star Line to prevent people taking them?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
They'd learnt early on.
Early on. And this steward I met who told me about it, he said he's in the antique business now, and he said if you went across the Atlantic now, you'd probably find a trail of silver across the bottom, and you keep it going forever.
So do these have the Titanic on it? No.
No, they don't. They never put the Titanic on the plates or the knives, forks or spoons or anything.